he had mentioned, he's like, just send me a Mechanical Hub logo and I'll get a tattoo. And I'm like, yeah, right. I mean, I didn't think he was serious the whole time we were talking. And I don't know if you saw it on social media, but he freaking did it. He's got it on his back.
Who didn't see it? And I saw it. I was like, what?
It was not a small tattoo either.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Make Trades Great Again podcast. Our friends from the Appetite for Construction podcast are joining us today for a special episode. Stay tuned.
All right, guys. So we're coming off Thanksgiving, holiday. The famous in the plumbing world is Brown Friday. I know you guys don't necessarily do a lot of drain cleaning, but, Brown Friday is a thing. And I came up with, actually, I got this email from Yelp. And, whatever you say about Yelp, but it had it had the 20 most clogged cities in the U.S. But I'm going to ask you for the top 5, if you can guess the 5 cities that you think are in the top 5 for the most, like Google searched for drain cleaning, clogged toilets, and, all that good stuff. So the top 5 most clogged up cities. Can you name one?
I'll name one. New York City. Sorry, Andy, I took it.
I was going to say like Cincinnati. I don't know why. No basis.
I was going to say Detroit for some reason. I don't know.
Detroit.
None of those 3 are on the list. Can you believe it?
What?
Yeah.
No, this list is rigged. Every time I see a list, I'm like, wrong.
It's Yelp.
Yeah.
What's the best song of all time? Wrong. Straight to jail. Okay. None of
Think
those
of
are
where
on the
people
list.
are most full of shit. Can I say that on this podcast?
Yeah, you can say
on
that.
this podcast.
What are we gonna say? Yeah, on this podcast, that's where they are. Philadelphia, it's on the list.
Oof. Let me look here.
Chicago.
Oh wait, you don't even have the list on you yet?
No, I have it up. Nope, that's not on the list. Number 1,
totally rigged.
because I don't want to, belabor this topic here, but number 1 is LA, California.
I was thinking California, but then you said cities. Because I know they just have like a boatload of, I see so much drain cleaning activity coming out of California.
Yeah.
What's with that?
Yeah. Well,
maybe
that's where they all migrate to, I guess.
Well, it's because they don't have like licensing in the same capacity. That's my take on it. That's not a dig on plumbers out in California. I'm sorry.
So number 2 is Miami, maybe the Cuban food or.
Wow.
It's the elevation there, probably.
Yeah.
Half of it's underwater.
Yeah, lack thereof.
So 3 is Nashville, 4 is Sacramento, and 5 is Baltimore. I don't know why.
I mean, maybe I could have come up with Miami.
It's in the top 10 though. Minneapolis.
No kidding?
Yeah.
That's actually surprising to me.
Yeah.
Huh. I don't know why I'm surprised. I've never given this thought before today.
I know.
I've been thinking of this for a year, and then you told me Minneapolis. It just shattered my dreams.
That's right.
I'm moving.
Okay. Well, let's get into it. So you guys, we were talking the other day, and of course that's not going to matter to anybody listening, but we were talking the other day, the 4 of us, and we said, hey, why don't we do another episode together? Because it's been a while. And Tim came up with the best idea that I heard, and we were running with it. So we're just going to look back on our year 2024, kind of through the eyes of the podcast. That's kind of how I thought we were going to look at this, and then give a quick look forward. So this is going to be anybody listening, this is going to be kind of a look back on what we thought was interesting to each one of us when it came to either having somebody on the show or a topic that we talked about. And I'd like to hand it over to any one of you to start. I've got a list. I've got a couple things I want to bring up, and I'll keep them brief, but I'd love to hear from you guys first.
I'll throw in, since we talked about this the other day, and I wasn't sure of the finality or the direction we were going, if we're going to strictly look at podcasts. I know one of the things that I've really enjoyed this year, and we've done it now for a couple of years, but I do still enjoy the American Plumber Series podcast that we do. And a lot of that's just really shining a light on the men and women in the country that are, and even this year out of country, that are really making a difference in their communities, and not only what they do professionally, but a lot of what they're doing on their own to help their communities be better. I mean, for instance, the Maui podcast that we did to start the season. I mean, that was pretty heartfelt and emotional and pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've been watching the episodes. Not that they weren't interesting to me before. They were great. I've watched all of them. Probably not every one of them in their entirety, but I've tried. Maybe it's just timing or something. But this year is different because they traveled across, they kind of left the continental United States and, well, down in Australia or Tasmania. That's crazy. I think it's fascinating so far. It's a totally different look on the whole series, and I've been interested in it.
Yeah, I've been kind of following along a little as well. It's been fun to kind of see a little bit of the different other side of it.
So one that recently just ran for us is this plumber and his wife out of Washington State. And he's been on the podcast maybe a couple years ago. We had him back on, and he's got a lot of tattoos. And he had mentioned, he's like, just send me a Mechanical Hub logo and I'll get a tattoo. And I'm like, yeah, right. I mean, I didn't think he was serious the whole time we were talking. And I don't know if you saw it on social media, but he freaking did it. He's got it on his back. So
who didn't see it? And I saw it. I was like, what?
It was not a small tattoo either.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
that sucker looked like it was about 5 to 6 inches wide. That was huge.
I know. So I mean, that was just cool for the branding aspect, I guess, when he's got his shirt off working or something. I don't know, but
yeah, that was cool. That was wild. Did you see the other tattoos on him though? Like he had like Upanor logo,
Milwaukee. Yeah.
Milwaukee.
He's got a Navian one that goes down his like calf. That's what I went over to him, and he was wearing shorts. We were at the Upanor event, and I saw him, and I walked over to him. I said, "Tell me how much you like Navian without, telling me how much you like Navian," because it was just a giant tattoo down his calf. So,
where did you meet him?
At an Upanor event. They had that experience center opening last year. So, yeah,
that's right, here in Minnesota.
Yeah,
that's right. Andy, you got something?
Well, yeah. So I guess it kind of rolls into like, John's, Upanor experience thing. It's, about being able to go out and look at, new products, new things, kind of keep the trade invigorated. What's that drive that gets you up in the morning and says, hey, we're going to go do this. And, we're going to put this new product in.
I thought mine was my prostate, but yeah.
That's a different kind of drive, John.
That's what gets you up, you mean?
Yeah, it gets me up in the morning.
That's right.
Oh boy.
But
speaking of Brown Friday.
Yeah, right. Jeez. Number 95, PEX gas piping. Was an episode that was fun. It was an interesting, I don't know. I mean, I think we just came out of either AHR. I think it was AHR. And I don't know. Just looking back through episodes, it was kind of like that. What kind of things, get you going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I thought there was gonna be a lot more controversial. Is it, how do you? I can't even talk. I have the worst time talking in the morning. It's crazy. I thought there's gonna be a lot of controversy over that product when we talked about it. I remember putting a video out on like Instagram or something, and when I first learned about this PEX gas pipe coming to the U.S. and like was approved and all this stuff, do you remember who makes that stuff? Was it?
I think it's sold under John Guest.
Joan Stevens.
Joan Stevens.
That's what it was.
That's right.
Yep. Yeah. And like the whole idea of using plastic for gas pipe, like above ground and everything, because we're using it outside, but the idea that we were going to start using this PEX type product, I haven't heard anything about it since.
Like I got it on the shelf at one of my supply houses. I have not yet used it. It seems interesting. The fitting looks a lot like a PEX press style fitting.
But it's a different fitting. It's a different jaw that you have to use, like different tool or whatever.
Yeah, it's PEX PEX product, as my understanding, or polyethylene PE.
Yeah.
But like say I haven't priced it out or anything, and it's kind of been sitting there, and I'm like, do I need, should I buy a set of tools for it and start running this so it doesn't just disappear off the shelf? But then I'm like,
and then you're nervous. I know you can't use it outside. Yeah. So sort of along the lines of like new products that get you excited. I don't know if the industry's like completely over it. I don't know if the politics are going to change the whole movement, but I am still to this day at least interested in EV vehicles. And we did an episode this year on Make Trades Great Again that was, we did two, actually. It was episode 286 and 290. So it was back in May 14th and June 11th. I made sure to write those down and have them for this recording because I usually fumble through that part of it. And I bring something up and nobody knows where to find it. So if you look through our archives on whatever you're listening to us on, you can hear us talking with two different people. One was Denver Baker, multiple time guest on the show. He was on first with us in May, and we talked about the main manufacturers for EV cargo fleet type vehicles. So like a transit van and a Sprinter and a what's that GM one, Andy, that is in partnership with GM. I'm gonna put you on the spot. You're gonna have to look it up.
Something starts with a B, I think. Blue.
Anyway, yeah, no. So, and then there's Rivian. That you've seen those with the Amazon logos in your neighborhoods, right, guys? Like all of you have seen the Rivian electric vans, I'm sure.
Made right down the street from me.
Are they really?
Yeah, about 45 miles. They're made in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois.
I think I remember you saying that before. No, to me, it's fascinating, the whole idea that electric vehicles are probably just the starting point for how we're going to see the whole industry change. But that's not what I'm not talking about your politics or whether you think you should have an EV vehicle or not. I thought that conversations were interesting because while we're not quite ready for them in our industry, the plumbing, HVAC, service industry, like electrical, anybody that's in a cargo van driving these service trucks every day, I don't think we're set up for it and ready for them yet. And I don't think the vehicles are kind of quite there and completely. But it's interesting to me because the topics around the conversation were like, what if tomorrow you decided to go all electric? Denver brought that up, and I thought it was a really cool conversation. Yeah. And so we talked about that in those episodes, and then we revisited the topic just a couple of weeks later because it sparked a lot of interest, and we got a lot of downloads on those episodes. So on June 11th, HVAC J, so Jason Norman out of, where's he at, Andy? British Columbia?
Yep.
He came on and he was talking about his city, in that there's a lot of multi-story, high-rise type of living.
Yep.
And how with that kind of concentration of people living in one small footprint on the ground, where are you going to put these? How are you going to charge these things? Where are you going to park these vehicles?
Right.
It's already difficult enough that, they're just there overnight, but now we got to park them there for long periods so we can charge them, stuff like that. And how are you going to get the infrastructure in place for somebody that's, parking there, at the high, at a high rise, at a condo building or something like that.
Well, and we've run into that too, where you can't park your van in those parking garages, right? If you're going to service that building, you can't park in the garage. You have to park out on the street somewhere. So,
yeah, in most cases, you'd have to have the short roof style van, and maybe then you're still not getting it.
Yeah. So it is interesting, and I get, every now and then I'll get somebody that'll be like, "Oh, are you getting set up to get an EV van? Did you guys end up finding one?" And I was like, it's a cool idea. I like it. I mean, I like the concept.
You need to put sirens on them, because we've had this conversation on our podcast that emergency vehicles can go to, if there's an emergency, they can just park wherever, go in and take care of that person who's under duress. And cops they're not going to ticket that. But if your house is leaking, a plumbing van pulls up and you pull in front of a house, you're going to get ticketed or towed. You know what I mean? So it's interesting.
Well, if at the very least, I see the biggest problem with like not the emergency, but sort of related to that, but just the cold weather is going to have a bigger impact, I think, on the operation overall. Like here, it's already in the 20s for highs, just suddenly, and that's not cold. That's not really that bad. But if you look at it just like, would you prepare this way is if you had 6 of these vehicles and you had maybe 10 trucks, is half your fleet going to be ready to go every day as soon as that weather changes? Like how's that going to impact your productivity? Like, I mean, it wouldn't matter how many of these you have. If it's 1 or 100, like, are they going to be impacted by like the major weather change? Because a week ago it was 50 degrees, right? And we know the performance is affected, but like, how much is it going to affect that? For me, I've said this 1,000 times. I said on the podcast, and I'll end it here. I park my truck, my van in my shop every single day. It doesn't, unless I go on the road, which I just did recently, but it's so rare. Like, my vehicle's reliably capable of or available to charge every single day. Yeah. So I don't know. But that's not how the industry is. And that's why I think the conversation was interesting when we had it on the podcast. So that's why I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah.
Well, I know over the last year or so, probably even longer, we've talked to a few guests, or it's sprinkled in different podcasts. I can't give you exact ones, but artificial intelligence, AI is a big thing. You go to trade shows, there's more booths that are, talking about it or dealing with it. I know you guys work with it. I know Eric does a lot with it, with ChatGPT and the thumbnails on the MTGA podcasts are AI generated, things like that. And, what was 2-3 years ago was this very scary, oh my God, it's taking over the world, can be used in a good way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty cool. I just used it the other day I've done it a few times now, but I had to calculate the ventilation requirements for a project that I'm going to be doing the radiant heating on, and that's going to be their only source of heat. They're not going to have they're going to have a mini split for cooling, and I guess supplemental heat, I suppose. But it's a new construction, like barndominium, and so no ductwork at all. And there's going to be a bath fan. There's no gas appliances whatsoever. So I'm going through the worksheet for the permitting, and I'm like, that's right. I'm now going to have to address ventilation for one of the very few times I ever have to address it, because I'm not ever doing any ducted systems.
Yeah.
And usually radiant is just like one part of the entire mechanical. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it's basically the entire mechanical. And I was like, well, crap. Like, I haven't really done this, to be honest with you. It's not in my regular work. And so I turned to AI immediately, because I know I opened up my code book first. Let me say that. I opened up my code book, Minnesota Plumbing and our Mechanical and Fuel Gas Code. That's where this is addressed. I think it's chapter 501, to be honest with you. And it gives you the list of things you have to check off to see where you're at. And it's like a percentage of your exhaust volume and all that kind of stuff, and CFMs and what do you need to make up for that. And with one bath fan and a small like range hood basically attached to a microwave over the electric stove, and then no gas appliances because the boiler is the only one, and that's direct vent. I was like, I think I don't need makeup air. I don't need an ERV or anything like that. And I turned it to ChatGPT just to see what it said. And it gave me the calculations in Minnesota and everything, like all the math. And I'm looking at this. This is wild.
Yeah.
And whether it was 100% accurate, which I should bring up, because I don't fully believe everything that AI tells me. I think that's something that everybody should acknowledge, that you shouldn't. But that's the end of that story. But if you really think about it, a year ago, Andy, where would you have thought that you would turn to AI to be like, oh, what's the heat loss on this struck on this building, and
Yeah.
now we're doing it kind of regularly.
Right. I wouldn't, I guess I didn't, a year ago, I was like, oh, this is novel,
Yeah.
it's cool. I don't do that much technical writing or writing where I need to have AI, correct this for me. And that was my thought, a year ago, was that's what this is going to do.
Yep.
And it wasn't until we started asking it questions that seemed silly, like, oh, well, why would you ask? I mean, you wouldn't put in a Google search and be like, oh, figure out my makeup air requirement for this building, because Google wouldn't provide you what you needed. In a roundabout way, you'd probably be able to find it. But yeah, it is interesting. I had a conversation. I was like, it's not a conversation. Commented on a post on Facebook here last week, I think, where it was in the House Call Pro group. Somebody had asked, hey, what can I use AI for, or Chat GPT for? What kind of advantages in my business? And I was like, oh, this is going to be a cool conversation, and it didn't really get as much traction as I was hoping, but it kind of went that same direction. And my comment was, use it to like ask any question that you want, right? Like, I need to know what the electrical code says about disconnects and snow, depth of snow, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's super a complex thing that would require you to spend some time in the code book, right?
Right.
Well, guess what? Near as I know, the NEC doesn't actually say anything about snow depth. It's got to be accessible. So if you consider the snow to be a barrier to access, then you got to get above that. But if you don't consider the snow to be a barrier, then it isn't regulated by the code. It's just kind of this thing. But anyway, you go back to those kinds of questions that, like the air requirement. What's the heat loss for this room, this specific room? And you want the math for this specific room? Here you go.
Right.
And that's the part I think that I guess I kind of find novel about it. I mean, it's still kind of a novelty, I think, because there's still that question of, well, is it right? But then I go, well, there's no reason for it to be wrong. I mean, it physically looked up the information, did and provided the data,
Aggregated all Google searches, I guess, and puts it together. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't have any reason not to believe it at this point. I went back and checked it on a 2-room heat loss that I did. And I went through and I, took all the information and, looked at it and was like, oh, this is really cool. And had Chat GPT do the calculations. And then I went back through and I used 3 different sizing softwares that I normally would use.
Yeah.
Like different random times. Every one of them was within 1 BTU per square foot.
Wow. That's
I was like,
wild.
all right. That's fine. I like this.
I know John and I have been to several events this year and previous years, and especially in the last 2 years. I mean, companies like Service Titan, Nexstar, some of these business admin or software platforms that, business owners utilize in their everyday trade shops. AI has become a main focal point of how they, use their software. You mentioned House Call Pro. I assume House Call Pro has some sort of AI integration into that platform. I mean, I'm amazed at seeing how they've integrated AI into all their different, be it human resources, their call centers, transportation, all the kinds of things beyond things like, just stocking the warehouse in your shop and stuff with parts.
Yeah, in our industry, the software stuff is starting to use, like, it's usually like plug-in stuff, so it's not part of the main platform or structure of it. But like the 2 things that stick out and seem to be in use right now would be like routing for scheduling.
Mm-hmm.
That's AI can handle that like really, really well. Because it's built for it. Like it's just like GPS and, like that, all that stuff's already out there. And then the scheduling and the routing, that's number 1. And then like accounting and stuff like that is you're starting to see like invoicing, payments, things like that are like being automated through AI. So you're sort of, I think my prediction for like like near future will be for a service tech on the field, any industry, somebody that's dealing with a customer face to face and doing that billing procedure, like the job is done, here is the invoice, like that's going to start to be like, you're going to take the person right out of it. Not that you can't do that now, but it's going to be done in a different way so that like this AI stuff's just going to automate it in a totally different, more probably, I think it's going to become more like accepted by the consumer side of things. The reason why that's going to be important is for one, accounting, like people make mistakes. And then two, I won't use any specific person. I'll use myself. When I worked for a big shop and we did service work, we didn't bill on site. Right. And it's because our company didn't train us to do that. And because we were like a bunch of new construction, plumbing, and heating people, right? And so we didn't have the right training. We didn't have the tools. And then because of that, nobody wanted to tell somebody like how much something was going to cost.
Right.
And so you could take a industry full of people who are very good mechanics and like eliminate that side of things. Like, here, I'm here to do the job you've already discussed with our company in one way or another, or I'm going to tell you the job that needs to be done, and you're going to deal with our AI part of our, how our company operates, and you're going to make that decision on whether or not you're going to pay for this or that. I think that's going to be the thing that's going to change the service industry a lot, is just taking the accounting side of it out. And it's probably going to start doing things like it's going to affect things like pricing and what people are willing to pay and things like that. I'll guarantee it. But I don't want to get into that, but that's where I think we're going to see it.
I think you're right with the business administration side of it. I'm curious though, you mentioned something, Eric, in training. You and Andy do a lot of training with either locally or you're on the road training at manufacturers. Have they started integrating AI into their training?
Not that I've seen yet.
Right. I haven't either.
Okay.
I don't know why they wouldn't.
I would assume that's going to be up the road pretty soon as well.
Yep.
Talk about training. So I have my community ed. What? I have my continuing ed due at the end of December because my 2 years is up on my license renewal. And like every year in the past, every cycle, I have not started it yet. And I have to do 16 hours. I don't know why I do this to myself. I think you talk about training, Tim, and like there's a place where AI could totally, like they could admin AI into this, and because I could do all my training online now.
Yeah.
And years past that wasn't the case. Until kind of recently. And I think that you could see AI doing these ridiculous PowerPoint kind of structure of this training pretty easily. And you wouldn't even, like the person on the other end, the trainee, you'd never know, so these companies could really invest in that and get their courses built and kind of a little more, I don't know.
Yeah.
We need more juicy.
I think one of the avenues that I think that AI has got going to be a benefit for business is, and Eric, you kind of bumped on it a little bit. I thought you were going to go this direction, but you didn't. Was in your pricing, right? So one of the hardest things as a business owner is to say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to dig through my data. I'm going to look at all my sales. I'm going to look at my expenses. I'm going to look at my operating costs, and I'm going to sit down and I'm going to hash out what everything cost me. Right. Yeah. I'm going to look at this and I'm going to analyze this data. And that takes hours, if not weeks. Sometimes,
and and most people are no good at it.
No. And you don't even know what you're looking at. That's where, that's what, like House Call, for instance, one of their beta programs. And I've been kind of interested in seeing where this thing's going to go is there's a business coaching section, right? That's going to be AI driven. So as you're going through the year, you could pop up my coach, and this could be your business mentor, right? That's looking at your information and saying, hey, listen, you're missing the mark here. You know, here's your goals that you told me, you know, that we established some goals, or we established some wants out of this, and you're not making the mark, or hey, you know, you guys are doing an awesome job. You need to move your goal. You know?
Yeah. And that's a great point.
That's an interesting thing, you know, to think about that and go, well, why don't I just put this AI to work, just real time assessing my data?
Well, assessing the data would show you too where you're missing out. I think that's what you're saying, but like where you could be charging more. Like, hey, you're really successful at selling this one service at this price, but like they could probably look at what that price is in other in your market.
In other markets, yeah.
Yeah, where, you know, they could probably see just even what's being advertised online and use that to be like, oh, you're right in the middle, or you're at the low end, or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot more smarter people that can put it, make that tool for us. Well, let me ask you this, you guys. Are you guys, Tim, John, are you like, is AI useful right now? Have you seen like has it attracted you enough to even think about like paying for it so you have more than the free version? Or are there any kind of tools out there you've come across that you thought this will help me every day and I'm willing to pay for it?
For me, not so much. You know, by trade, I'm an editor, I'm a writer. So, you know, talking to people in the industry is more of a human experience, a connection, instead of, you know, I'll give you a quick story. I did a story on a mechanical contractor, and I was working with the PR department of that mechanical contractor, and I said, just send me some background information, anything you can. And so somebody low on the PR company sent me all this information, a couple quotes and stuff like that. So I put it in the story, and I sent it back to the marketing team at the mechanical contractor, and the head guy got back to me. He's like, do you use ChatGPT or AI for any of your stories? I'm like, no, absolutely not. He goes, because the first part of this paragraph this quote sounds like it's ChatGPT. And it turns out that the lower guy at that PR department sent me it based off of ChatGPT. You know, I didn't know what it was. So it was kind of the irony of it. But I don't really, no, not for me. Tim, how about you?
I do. I use Otter AI for all of my Teams calls. We've been on Teams calls with manufacturers. Otter AI is it transcribes the entire conversation and then pulls out the important parts that are maybe of importance for some campaign we're doing with manufacturing partners, or.
But that's usually when your screen goes blank and, you know, you're out of the room.
So no, I'm kidding. I've used it to, you know, to transcribe meetings that we're on with manufacturers. So I know, especially if we're talking about product, you know, maybe we're doing a campaign 2-3 months up the road and they're giving me a lot of data on products. Eric may not be on the call, so rather than me write it down fast as I can, it's nice to have that AI generated overview of the meeting we've just had, so I can relay some of that details to Eric or you if you're not on the call. So for that, I found it very, very valuable.
Well, that's true, because when you're taking notes, you're not paying attention really to what's being said. You're concentrating on. So that's a good benefit to have.
So I've used it that way, and then as for research, it's great for research. If I'm, you know, thinking about topics for a podcast that we're doing, maybe I want to do some historical research on a manufacturer or their brand. I'm not finding it in Wikipedia. I go to ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to continue to use it the way I am now, and I hope to see kind of more come out of it. For me, it's been fun and ultimately useful, like you guys brought up earlier. Like the image generation for me has been a good tool. I don't use 100% of it, and some of the stuff it generates is just wild. And I'll like send stuff to Andy and be like, "Hey, check out this. Should I use this?" You know, as like the podcast thumbnail, or you know, for YouTube and stuff. It's, you know, it's not perfect by any means when you're using it kind of as a Google source. And I think a lot of what we've talked about so far today is kind of that function of it. Although we've included a lot more than that, but yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to continue to do that. I was thinking about this year, next year though, as the podcasts are concerned. And one of the things we talked about the other day when we were kind of setting up for this episode is like, what are you looking forward to in 2025? And whether it's podcast related or not. And I was just I think it's just like every other year where we look at the beginning of the year as we end one, we start thinking about like going to the trade shows. And I know it seems like a low hanging fruit, and we've talked about it many times on the podcast, both podcasts. But the trade shows are coming up. And if you're listening to this now, there's a really awesome show that I don't think, if you're in the plumbing and HVAC industry, I don't think you should skip it. I think you should consider it if you're in the heat, if you do more heating work, and that's AHR Expo. And here's why. 2 reasons for me. What I get excited about for AHR is hanging out with other people and seeing them face to face, meeting them maybe for the first time or seeing them again, like spending time. Because there's lots of things you could do, like after parties, and you can make your own schedule and do whatever you want. Go out to lunch with somebody. That's cool, valuable networking, right? And then 2 is like obvious, like the whole reason the trade show kind of exists is to see the new products coming out. Mm-hmm. And I have no doubt in North America at AHR, we're going to see more heat pump technology than we've ever seen before.
You think?
Andy and I have talked about heat pumps on top of heat pumps, like we're going to have like heat pump pencils at some point in time. Like everything's got a freaking heat pump on it. But I'm interested to see that because Andy and I just installed recently together, and then Andy did an additional one, kind of one of the first to industry from this manufacturer, a heat pump system for hydronics. I know it's not totally new, but it's been out there, right? Mm-hmm. In different countries, and a few different manufacturers have had them, but now it seems like they're here and everybody's got one. So like, I'm just interested to see that kind of stuff expand. So that was my kind of look forward into 2025.
No, I would agree with the heat pump thing. You're going to see a lot of it. I'm interested to see how these new products all work together because, excuse me, you talk about heat pumps, and are heat pumps standalone? Are they, in a northern climate, are they able to work on their own? Do you need a backup heat source? I mean, I think a lot of these companies got into the heat pump market just to get into it, and they're like, oh, shit, we got to figure how this is actually going to work in all climates. So I'm interested in that for sure.
Well, and one of the things you see with that too is you see companies that aren't refrigeration companies, that they don't have any basis of experience with refrigerants, having a product that's largely built of refrigerant components.
Yeah.
So there's a whole nother level of tech. There's a whole nother level of manufacturing and challenges that come with that.
I agree. I mean, all of a sudden you've got companies that only ever made like hot water boilers, right?
Right.
And now they've got a heat pump. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking smaller companies, domestic here. And so that was it's interesting to see that expansion. Mm-hmm. The water heaters, I think they're going to be accepted kind of because I can think just a couple of years ago, like how foreign it seemed for most contractors to think of installing a heat pump water heater, like a tank water heater. And now I'm starting to see their acceptance a little bit more. Sales are probably on a very slow increase, but I liken it kind of to like how we saw tankless like evolve throughout. Like I talk to customers about tankless now as if it weren't even really any different than talking to them about a regular water heater. It's like so normal, it seems. The conversation where just a few, handful of years ago, it was like, hey, have you considered tankless? And people are like, what? Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. The technology, I agree, John. Are they going to be able to produce this equipment with the right kind of refrigerations and stuff like that to work in the super cold climates? I think they're there. I think there's a lot of CYA, like the cover your ass kind of, like engineering, for design and stuff like that, for specs that are already in place. But yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be interesting.
Well, like you, Eric, I'm always looking forward to the trade shows. We've got World of Concrete. It's an opportunity to see all the major power tool manufacturers in one location. That's always a great show in January. We've got Builder Show in AHR in February, and then a show that we've always enjoyed, at least John and I have gone to it for many years. Eric, you've gone a couple times, the Wet Show in March. That's always, I think they've moved it to February this year, but the Wet Show in Indianapolis is always a decent show with all the drain cleaners, and it's but AHR is still the Super Bowl of trade shows in our industry, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Curious though, we've just had an election. Thank God election talk is over with. Do you see anything from a political realm, i.e. tariffs and stuff like that, affecting day-to-day operational jobs that you guys do?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it will.
It's gonna.
Well, it's coming.
Yeah, there's going to be an impact. I mean, every single item that we touch, right, has some impact from an imported product or good.
Yep.
Right, and to sit back and believe that it's not going to have a day-to-day impact or a cost increase that's kind of, in my opinion, is foolish. But
yeah, 100% foolish. Totally. I can just point it back to, without any I'm not going to give you data. But absolutely, it already affected us years ago when the tariffs came in from China.
Yeah.
And for raw materials, there's no steel mills here in a major operation. Nobody's making U.S. steel that are going into the products we're buying. They can be American-made products, but they're importing that raw materials. And so for one, and I've harped on this so many freaking times that people around me are so sick of me hearing me talk about it. But the cost of freaking tank water heaters is absolutely astronomical. And the reason why I get so uptight about this is it's affected sales. It's absolutely affected my customers, 100%, everybody around us, because 99% of houses have tank water heaters in them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there you go. It's totally affected people, and it's not political statement. It's just a fact. It's a tax that's going to kill. it's going to kill sales. I'm not overstating that by any means. And yeah, it's definitely going to affect us moving forward, especially if we see higher tariffs and increased number, having to put on different products or different countries, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think there's going to be I don't know if the word is a trickle up effect, essentially, but I think that that along with that, we're going to see, a lack of material is going to be a one, because we're not going to see it. I mean, we saw a very brief chunk of this in 21, 22, right? When we had the port issues and and the where
shipping and stuff.
Our shipping wasn't happening. So if you just kind of extrapolate that out a little bit to, okay, these things aren't coming anymore because they're too expensive. I don't, how do you get around that? I mean, we can't just flip a switch and then say, well, we're just going to make it here.
Yeah.
Right?
It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
They're not doing it yet.
Right. We're not ready for that. I don't think, and I don't think that this country, I don't know how we got off on a political talk here, but I personally don't think this country is ready to become a manufacturing company or country. I don't think there are enough people who are willing to say, I'm ready to go work on the assembly line. I'm ready to go work in a factory. And I don't want to put that down because there's some amazing high, good paying jobs, some great career opportunities there. But I don't think there are enough people that are open to it. We can't get people to sign up right now to be a plumber or an electrician or a data communication guy. You can't get people that want to go out and be excavators. I mean, any of those manufacturing type jobs are very much so in line with what it means to go out and work with your hands, be in a skilled trade. And we can't fill those positions. So if we open up, let's say, I don't know, 400,000 or 500,000, maybe 2 million manufacturing jobs, who's going to work those? Right?
Robots.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I don't want to leave on I don't want to be Debbie Downer at the end of this podcast. I think it was fun. I love talking to you guys. You've got a bunch of APS, the American Plumber Stories stuff coming up, or just a couple more maybe for this season?
3?
I think there's 3 or 4 more. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. And you guys, for anybody listening that's typically listening to Make Trades Great Again, the Appetite for Construction podcast, you guys are going out weekly, sometimes even twice weekly. Is that right?
We pared it down to 1 a week, and then every maybe 2 weeks we'll do a Friday episode. Who wants to listen to 2 knuckleheads talk? But yeah.
Well, I'll tell you though,
so.
I'm hoping to get back on the road more often in 2025 and doing more podcasts on the road. John, we've done several of those. They've been well received. They've been a lot of fun to do beyond just the stuff we do at like trade shows, but some of the on the road stuff has been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's fun. Andy and I have done the road stuff too. It's been interesting. The trade show stuff is challenging. I'll say that.
It is.
Yeah, it's true. It's an investment of time and energy and things like that. But it's worth it. Don't get me wrong, but it does cut into your experience. You know, we're talking about AHR. You guys did what, 3 or 4 last year?
3
for sure 4.
Yeah.
4. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think I like. I mean, the live audience thing. Part of it is a whole new grind to it. You know, Eric, you and I tried doing the some Facebook Live stuff. I mean, it was fun. Again, it's very similar to the on the road. There's like this added level of difficulty that's you know.
I'd like to do more of the Facebook Live ones, but here's the trouble: you have to do it when people are. So we normally record at 7:00 in the morning, right?
Yeah.
And so there's not a lot of people on Facebook watching a live at 7 a.m. And so we would have to be able to make room for that, like on, let's say, like a Sunday afternoon or something like
a weekend.
that. Right. And, you know, look, as much as I love doing the podcast, I look forward to every single week, you know, making additional time, taking additional time out of the schedule.
Right.
Can be challenging, put it that way.
Yeah.
So, right on, guys. Well, I'm going to sign off on behalf of Make Trades Great Again. And I think this was a fun episode. We're long. I think Andy and I say that every single time we record.
It's a good one, though.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity to get together. Like I said, we do this every few months. We'll what do they call it? Crosstalk with the podcast. It's fun.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. All right, guys. I'm going to sign off on Make Trades. You guys have a good day.
All right.
See you guys.
All right, guys.